Hey, Margie here. Today we're talking about the vagus nerve. And the vagus nerve serves as the body's superhighway, carrying information between the brain and the internal organs. And having a healthy vagus nerve can have beneficial effects on your bones and overall health. And the best part is there's so much that we can do to improve the function of our vagus nerve, which we're going to talk about today. And our special guest is Dr. Eva Detko. And Dr. Eva is a natural healthcare practitioner, author, and speaker. And she studied natural medicine and the human mind for over 23 years. She has successfully recovered from chronic fatigue and fibromyalgia and reversed Hashimoto's thyroiditis. And she now helps others recover their health. She has extensive knowledge and experience in the fields of human physiology, biochemistry, nutritional sciences, and bioenergetics. And she uses a wide range of mind transforming modalities in her work. She is the author of Sovereign Health Solution, Heal the Psychoenergetic Root Causes of Chronic Illness. And this episode is an interview that I did with Dr. Eva. That was a bonus as part of my first summit, Natural Approaches to Osteoporosis and Bone Health. And there's just so much good information and techniques that you can put into your life that I wanted to share it with all of you. So this is full of great information. So stay tuned. I'm so excited to have you here, Dr. Eva. Welcome.
Hi, Margie. Hi, everybody.
So let's just get started on this important topic. Before we really get into the vagus nerve, let's just talk about the connection between our nervous system. Why does our nervous system have to be balanced? And how does that affect bone health?
Yes, that's certainly a good place to start to make this connection. People may already be aware that stress is not good for their bone health, but I just want to quickly say why that is and how that links to our nervous system in general. So when we're talking about stress activation, when we're talking about activating fight and flight response, this is associated with specific neurochemistry. And so people may already be aware of the issues with excess cortisol floating around in the bloodstream and not clearing properly. Now, that's going to be the case if that stress response, which is only meant to be activated very occasionally, is activated time and time again, which of course we know in the Western world, our modern lives, people, that said, I feel pretty zen, but a lot of people just kind of get sucked into the sort of craziness of our modern lives. And so that can definitely generate this cycle of fight, flight all the time with not much relaxation time in between. And the reality is that we evolved with this fight and flight response, the stress response, to get us out of actual, proper, real danger, get us away from real threats. But these days, this could be a traffic jam, this could be an email. People just get activated very, very easily. They activate the fight or flight very, very easily. So rather than spend 90% of the time being relaxed and only using that adaptation that we evolved with, for like 10% of the time, it's actually, for a lot of people, it's the reverse. And they spend most of their waking hours and sometimes even at night being activated. Now, what that's going to do is when you have this neurochemistry that comes with a stress response, the normal thing for the body and the healthy thing for the body is to have that rise in cortisol, in epinephrine, norepinephrine, cortisol, and then this needs to clear out from the system, so it needs to be properly metabolized and cleared away. Now, of course, if we activate the fight and flight over and over and over again, that's not going to be the case, and so you're going to have this excessive amount of those non-metabolized hormones that are just not metabolized properly, floating around. And what that actually does from the point of bone loss, it's not good news because it actually promotes bone loss. And so what we know from research, obviously, the mechanics of it, the exact mechanism of it, I'm not going to go into, but increased activity of osteoclasts are basically associated with inflammation and sympathetic nervous system activation. So that's what I'm talking about, fight or flight. So your bones will break down in those conditions. And then on the other side, we've got bone growth and increased osteoblast activity associated with the relaxation response. So that's why this is so critical to get right, the balance between the two. Now, I want to talk a little bit more about the balance, but essentially, you mentioned vagus nerve already. And so when we're talking about the relaxation, the rest, digest, detoxify, and heal, we're talking the vagus nerve, the ventral vagus nerve, because there's two vagus nerves. So the newer part of our vagus nerve is associated with that relaxation response. And what's interesting also about the vagus nerve is that this is the mechanism by which we deal with chronic inflammation. So if bone loss is associated with both stress and inflammation, then that one thing that can halt the stress hormone cascade and promote relaxation and put the brakes on chronic inflammation is strong vagus nerve. And so that's why this is relevant.
It's such, you brought up such good points because, throughout the summer, we are dealing with stress, but so many people in general, I mean, so many people I see in my practice really they're so worried about their exercise and their diet, and they don't realize that the stress, just like you said, in our everyday lives is equally, if not even more important, the foundation. So what you're talking about today is so essential. But let's back up a little and just tell everybody in detail. If they never heard of the vagus nerve, why don't you just go into what it actually is, where it connects, and why, when we can do some practices, it's going to make such a big deal for everybody's health and their bones.
Yeah, so obviously when we're talking about stress and the body, we're really, it doesn't matter where the stress is coming from, whether it is biochemical, chemical, biological, I mean, from like pathogens and those sort of things, whether it's chemical, whether it's psychological, emotional, whether it's mechanical, when you have subluxations and things like that, which also put stress on the nervous system. It doesn't really matter where the stress is coming from. The body will, when that response kicks in, it's the same response. But that said, it is the emotional stuff that that's the most elusive part, because people have a lot of trauma. Some of them don't even know how much unresolved trauma they have from the childhood, for instance, because they dissociated and they've been living in this dissociated state all their lives. So they don't even realize how much that trauma determined a lot of this nervous system imbalance, because a lot of it is set very early on in our lives, if not pre-birth, because we're also talking about the epigenetic imprint from previous generations as well. We know that's a thing as well, and that definitely impacts the balance. So to backtrack and just look at this overview of what we're talking about with this vagus nerve here, we've got our autonomic nervous system. That's the system that is responsible for all the processes in the body that we don't have to consciously think about. And within that system, we've got the sympathetic branch, which is the fight or flight that I have already mentioned. And then we've got our vagus nerve. Now, within the vagus nerve, there's two branches of that vagus nerve. One is associated purely with the relaxation response, or what I call rest, digest, detoxify, heal response. And the other side is the dorsal vagus. This is the old part of the vagus nerve, which is associated with the freeze response. So when we're talking about this vagus nerve, it connects. Why is this so important? Why is it so impactful? Why is it that by addressing the vagus nerve, you can address so many different issues in the body? Is because this is the 10th cranial nerve that connects to most organs in your chest and abdominal cavity. So whether we're talking issues around heart or lungs or pancreas or gallbladder or liver, small intestine, 2/3 of the large intestine, spleen, thymus, all of those organs are actually innervated. by the vagus nerve. So now we can only imagine that if that nerve is subpar in any way, it's not working the way it should, it doesn't activate readily because it has to activate readily. If we're going to be spend more time in the relaxed state, that is the healing state, it's associated with a healing neurochemistry. We're talking about oxytocin, we're talking about GABA, we're talking about serotonin, the healing chemicals that this response is associated with. If we're going to spend more time in it, that vagus nerve, the ventral vagus, that relaxation response needs to activate readily. And in most people, it doesn't. What activates readily is the fight or flight. And why is that? It's because of how it has been trained essentially. Because just like, and like, because you're a physical therapist, so yeah, I'm sure you talk about it a lot. When we train certain muscle groups and then we neglect the others, we're going to end up with all sorts of imbalances, right? So this is the same. You train one part of your nervous system so much because an email comes in, you sit in a traffic jam, then you're worried about your finances, then you've got some old traumas, you've got some emotional conflicts, you've got a lot of emotional toxicity, and you activate this part of your nervous system that is fight and flight over and over and over and over and over. What's that going to do? That's going to make it stronger and make it activate more readily. And then the other side, which is supposed to counter it, doesn't activate frequently enough. And so it becomes a little bit limp and it becomes a little bit pathetic. And it just makes it, after a while, it makes it harder for you to actually activate it when you need to just drop into this relaxation response, which is supposed to be most of the time. So that's basically where we end up with this imbalance. But obviously, I do want to stress that a lot of it comes from early exposure to stress and early trauma, when we really don't have any of this solidified and developed. Our brain and nervous system are only just developing during pregnancy and the first few years of our lives. And so we operate in a completely different way as children because our brainwave activity is predominantly that of a hypnotic state. So we kind of just like get everything thrown at us and we just take it at face value and we get programmed with all the stuff. We don't have enough tools or capacity oftentimes during those early years to regulate, so self-regulate well. And a lot of children don't have enough support in their environment, which comes with this constantly this lack of safety. And it's like if that's a dominant feature of somebody's childhood, and it could be that a child is more sensitive. It could be that they're not getting enough cuddles. It doesn't have to be associated with abuse and neglect. So I want to obviously emphasize that. It doesn't have to be associated with that because it's the internal interpretation of what's going on around the child that counts. It's not what a parent thinks. Oh, the child is fine. They're clothed. They have enough food to eat. They're good. If the child feels that they're not feeling safe because maybe parents are arguing all the time, or maybe for whatever other reason, they don't have that sense of safety, security, they're being looked after, their needs are being met. If they don't have that, research shows for at least 30% of the time in childhood, they're going to end up with that response of the nervous system already being ramped up. They're already ready. They're ready for a threat. They're kind of in that red alert sort of state. That's where it all essentially comes from. And then as we progress through life and various stressors, stressor, again, a person will respond to a stressor. One person will respond in one way. The other person will just go like, So obviously it's also an individual thing. But the point is that there's just so much coming at people, and particularly these days, there's so much coming at people that if they don't have that resilience within the nervous system and that good balance, then they will end up with that constant activation of fight and flight. Then the body is constantly flooded with the stress hormones. They're not clearing quickly enough from the system, and bang, before you know it, that's going to have an impact, not just on your bones, because obviously that's one thing that we're talking about here, but the chronic inflammation, you're going to have so much of it as a result of what I'm discussing here. That's obviously, we know that's a feature of pretty much every chronic illness, not just associated with bone health, right?
Absolutely. What affects the bones affects the whole body. And that's part of what we've talked about at the summit. And what you said is just so incredibly important. But there is good news because the work you do, we can help people at any level where there are. I mean, there's a lot of tools. So are you ready to share some of these amazing tools and where we can start with this? Because it is so vitally important. And it's true right now, especially we're living, not only are we wired for stress and we're wired for that tiger, but now we're living in such stressful times. So all of this combined is, as you said, just, not good for our bones, not good for our overall health, and something that really needs to be one of the first things, one of the foundational things that we all can do and really, really transform our lives. So give us some of the good news, Dr. Eva.
To me, that it's all good news, really, because absolutely, even if you have, and I'm one of these people who had a lot of trauma in my childhood. Okay, so absolutely, I recovered from Hashimoto's, I recovered from fibromyalgia and chronic fatigue. You can absolutely heal those things. You can recondition your nervous system. You can make it more balanced. That's something that we absolutely can do. Neuroplasticity. Remember, our nervous system is pretty clever. Our body in general is just set for survival and always strives towards recovery. And if we assist it the right way, we're going to be good. So what I want to say at the moment for people is right now, I would say even if you don't do any trauma work and if you're not ready to look at your patterns, behavioral patterns, limiting beliefs, all traumas, emotional conflicts, even if you're not ready to look at all of that in detail, the first thing that I want to say to you, prevent trauma as you going forward. So prevent trauma on a daily basis, prevent emotional layers building up, because we've got a lot of stuff coming. There's going to be a lot of changes in the world in a good way, but it's going to be disruptive. It's going to be chaotic. It's going to be very much dark to light, but that's going to come with a lot of upheaval, a lot of systems collapse, and all of that sort of stuff. Now, some people are ready for it. I'm ready for it, but a lot of people are not. And a lot of people will get hit hard and get traumatized by this whole situation. So I would say there are tools that you can use on a daily basis to build in a little bit of resilience, start training that relaxation response, and prevent what that's going to do at the same time as you put yourself as frequently as you can, as I give you some tools in a minute, some ideas. In the relaxation response, you can prevent further traumatization. You can prevent your all the emotional garbage accumulating in your system, because that's energy, and that emotional energy will eventually wreck your health. So at the moment, building resilience and preventing, future, like further traumatization that some people are having on a daily basis with all those micro traumas, all these little things that are happening. So we can do that, and that's a good place to start. Obviously, I do encourage doing the work. This work thoroughly means obviously going after the root causes of your emotional triggers and root causes of all of those things that you're experiencing on an emotional level. And that will mean dealing with trauma, including attachment trauma from early in your life. But if we just focus on building some resilience right now, there are some very simple things to do, which I want to share. I've got so many e-guides and things that are free, and people can just look at the different things, because there are many, many, many ways in which you can engage that relaxation response. But there is also things, and I really can't stress that enough. It's not just about what you do. It's equally about what you don't do. So if you keep sitting there in front of the news, the fake stuff that they're pumping out of the telly and engage with the fear porn, I'm sorry to say, you choosing to engage your fight and flight because that's what it's going to do, right? Unless you're like completely like, you know what, that's not touching me because I'm not, I'm not buying any of it. However, even even people who are very, very resilient, very, very switched on and sort of they have a healthy nervous system balance, I would still encourage them to limit that sort of engagement with those sort of fear-based, well, I would say, well, basically, I'm going to say it, fear-based propaganda. You need to engage as little as possible, if at all, because over time, this will break your balance and you're not even going to know. It's going to creep in very slowly. And before you know it, you're all, fear-based again. But people who already are quite fear-based, and that means that they're going to be activated. They have a lot of anxieties. They have a lot of fears, even anger. Those people really need to disconnect from this, from social media, from the media. That's like, that. This is really just as important as doing deep breathing, as doing meditation, as walking in nature, which are all the things that we can do to stimulate. I cannot emphasize this enough. Vagus nerve stimulation, it's not just about doing those things. So we need to disengage from toxic people, toxic influences, because any of that toxic input, and obviously that definitely involves people, is going to be constantly activating the fight and flight. Another thing that's going to constantly activate fight and flight is that negative self-talk. If somebody has a lot of sort of garbage self-talk where they beat themselves up and they have all of this, oh, I'm so stupid, I'm so fat, I'm so this, I'm so that. That's emotional toxicity, and that's definitely activating in the wrong way for the nervous system. I offer some techniques where you can just learn to just stop it and break that pattern over time. But obviously, again, if you were to go after the root cause of that, you'd never have that again. But that's kind of deeper work. So we can address it as kind of now in the moment level, or we can address it at a deeper level, in which case all those chronic fears, anxieties, and all those things, they just go away because if you address it properly, you're not going to have those in the first place and you don't have to manage it. However, if at the moment you just want to manage it, and maybe you're not even in a place where you're able to meditate because that just either winds you up or you don't know how to do it. Some very simple things and entry level type exercises that you can do before you even break into your meditation practice is deep breathing. Deep breathing is the easiest and cheapest, well, it's cheapest, it doesn't cost anything, and the most effective way to immediately put yourself in the relaxation response, i.e., activate the ventral vagus nerve. And what's important to know about that is that it has to be slow and deep, because when we stress, we don't do slow, deep breathing. We do shallow upper chest breathing. So when you slow your breathing down consciously, and if you breathe in through your nose, that actually activates the parasympathetic, then you're gonna slowly breathe out. Then everything, the neurochemistry in your body changes because everything's slowing down, and that's what we want essentially. Because the fight or flight is very sort of like activated, and like I said, the breathing is shallow, the heart rate is fast, and so we know we have the physical manifestation of the fight and flight. So it's almost like whatever you can do to flip that is going to be really good. So does this mean that we're going to have a list of vagus nerve exercises and they're going to work every time for everybody? No, it's an individual thing. If you feel something is really relaxing for you, then it's going to have that effect. And so in a way, I wouldn't say, oh, you must do this to activate your vagus nerve, or you must do that. Because if somebody wants to take a walk in nature, which I personally find one of the most regenerating things that I can do, and I give an example. I'm actually giving an example of that in my book because this is important. So let's say I love it and I love wildlife and I'm going to engage with all of that. And it's going to be the best thing ever. If I go for a walk, even if I'm already retired, I come back and I'm renewed. However, let's say somebody's got anxiety of some bugs and they go to a forest and supposed to have a relaxed walk in the forest, but instead they kind of like constantly feeling like, oh, there's this bug here, that bug there, and something's gonna like jump out and get me. Well, if they're gonna be in that state, they're not gonna activate the relaxation response. They're gonna activate their fight or flight. So that is why I say it depends. Nature is massively regenerating, earthing. So when we're connecting to the earth, usually by, let's say, by walking bare feet, which obviously right now we've got snow here. I'm not doing that right now outside, right? But there's earthing mats, there's various earthing products that people can do for those times of the year when you can't go outside and walk without your shoes. If somebody's got a lake, for instance, that they can go and swim in, that's also a thing. But you need to do that for like 20, 30 minutes. I've got this earthing mat that I sit on when I'm working on the computer. So I'm being grounded, I'm being as I'm doing all this stuff, which basically is EMS and it's not so good, right? So it's using strategies like that. And another thing that I want to mention, is I obviously mentioned deep breathing, and that's really, really highly effective. There are obviously a lot of breathing techniques, but if you are going to use breathing techniques to bring immediate calm and relaxation to your system, it has to be deep, slow breathing, because there are also techniques where you can activate fight or flight on purpose to cause this adaptation then in the system, because you're doing it in a controlled way. This is called hormesis. So we know that saunas work that way, exercise works that way, cold showers work that way. And so that is kind of like access, like poking fight or flight, but then bringing ourselves down into calm. And that controlled activation means that the system adapts and that it can handle more stress as we're doing that more and more. But if you just purely want to, say, for instance, maybe you already had chronic illness when you have just a lot going on, maybe some sort of hypersensitivities, and you just feel it's just all too much. You just want to calm everything down. Then you need to put emphasis on slowing everything down, including the breathing. It's about slowing it down. It's about exhaling really slowly, long, long exhales. That's going to activate the vagus nerve. And another one that I wanted to mention is gratitude practice, because the best measure that we have of vagal tone is heart rate variability. And we know from research that actually gratitude practice improves that. So increases heart rate variability, because that's what we want. We want heart rate variability to be higher. And so that's really beautiful, because that doesn't take a long time. And obviously, from the energetic perspective, you just bring focus to positive. You bring more focus to positive, and then you get more positive stuff, because all you're doing is you're focusing on the positive. So there are different levels and different reasons why this works so well. But that's one of my favorite things to do. And whether people want to do a little journal or just do a few minutes before they go to bed, last thing at night, or maybe first thing in the morning, it works. It works great either way. I personally combine it with havening techniques. So that's one of the modalities that I use. So one, like, really, for me, the best modality for trauma that I know of.
Can you explain that for a minute, exactly what that is?
So this is it's a psychosensory modality. And this modality, essentially, it's a neuroscience method. And what it does, it essentially, by stimulating the receptors on the skin in specific places, you induce a change in brainwave activity. And through that, you induce the change in neurochemistry. So you can do it. You can use havening in a variety of different ways, because on a simple level, you can actually consolidate. So, for instance, I use it with affirmations a lot because when you change the brainwave activity, it actually works with delta waves. So, by stimulating the receptors, you gently encouraging the brain to change its brainwave activity to the lowest brainwave activity, that is delta. And delta waves are associated with healing and regeneration. Well, obviously, during the deep sleep, we have delta waves present. And that is associated with a specific neurochemistry. So again, serotonin, GABA, oxytocin, and that's very healing neurochemistry. So we can act directly on the hippocampus and actually promote installing of good, like positive concepts. So affirmations, the whole point of affirmations is just like to install more positive ideas into neurology. And if you use it with havening, it can accelerate that. It really accelerates that by quite a bit, because with affirmations, you need a lot of repetition. So when you add havening, you still need to do this repetitively, but it accelerates it by quite a bit. And when it comes to trauma, havening acts directly, so acting directly on the limbic system and the amygdala here. And
Wow.
the limbic system being associated with all the fear responses and all those heightened emotional responses. And what we are talking here about is that with this method, we can delink trauma, meaning when you have trauma, what happens is you get receptors on the surface of amygdala neurons that basically come out and they stay in place. And the reason why that happens is because the system says, we had this situation, you survived this situation. So let's say something happened traumatic and you survived it. But now we're going to put those receptors on the surface of the neurons, like sticking out like that. And we're going to be ready. We're going to be ready every time something even remotely similar is coming our way. We are ready. We don't have to even prepare. We're ready. And and how people essentially experience this is, if anybody's had any sort of anxieties or fears, they know that they get triggered, and there is this, like, no matter how much they're trying to talk themselves out of feeling something, they're not going to be able to do that, because there is that cascade of chemistry that happens. And before they know it, they're activated and they have an anxiety attack or panic attack. That's the reason why. It's because those receptors are there, ready. And so you've got all of that, like, constantly in place. Now, with havening techniques, you can delink that. You can remove those receptors so that they're no longer activated. So in other words, that trauma goes away permanently goes away. You can have a memory of it. You will have a memory of it, but you will not have an emotional response. So
Wow,
that's how it's.
that's incredible, Dr. Eva. This sounds now, and for someone to learn that technique, do they work one-on-one with a practitioner? Is that something people can learn in a class? What have you found in your practice?
So that's the best part. The best part is that actually you can apply it on yourself. You can obviously work with a practitioner, but it's something that you can apply on yourself. And not just that, I actually teach a lot of it. It's obviously, you can use it for complex trauma. So I don't teach working with super complex stuff in my courses, but I believe, and I absolutely have proven this over the years, that if I give people the right guidance, they can do most of their own work, most of their own trauma work. They can do like 90% of their own work, unless they have a severe mental health issue, which obviously we're not talking about that here. But if somebody's just experiencing like chronic emotional activation and anxieties and things like that, they can do that work themselves. So I coach that in my programs, because there's only so many people I can work with. And I want to get it out and say to people, look, that's the tools. That's how you use them. And now you've got sovereignty because you can do this for yourself, right? So
Oh,
that's really, I love that, because that's the best part about the method, how easy it is, and how well somebody can pick it up, and when they connect with it, Yeah, it doesn't take a long time, and they can be doing all of this brilliant work and prevent further traumatization, which is what I was talking about. And it's perfect for this, for
Wow,
this,
I
for this.
can't get over this because, as you say, so many people. I mean, I even know my own triggers. Minor things can trigger things that, like, why? What is? And I loved your explanation. It makes so much sense. So, but how fabulous that there's a technique that you can actually stop it at the root, so that you don't have that whole cascade, which then goes on to cause all sorts of health problems. Well,
Yeah.
I
And
love this.
to be in the name of full disclosure, it's not the only technique out there that does that. Okay. Because now we have so many different neuroscience techniques that we know a little bit more about how the brain works, how it all kind of, takes place when trauma hits that people have come up with various different techniques, but I have used many of them over the years, and I'm saying that for me it's the top technique to use for this purpose. So I just want to say that I know other techniques work that way too, but I'm just saying for me I'm combining it with that's another thing, it lends itself very very well, and you can combine it with other tools. Like I just said, I'm combining it with affirmations. I'm combining it with gratitude, right? So you can then bring other tools that you maybe have studied or have experience of together. And that has even more of an impact on the brain and the nervous system. It's very, very healing. This thing is extremely healing for the brain and the nervous system and for the rest of the body because of the regeneration, the delta wave effect. Yeah.
Wow. Well, I mean, gratitude in itself is one of the antidotes to stress. So even gratitude compounds with additional techniques. That sounds fantastic. So we could go on and on. You're such a wealth of information. And I love the importance and that there's strategies and there's things that can be done. And I think the key thing is that people have to realize they can't just cover it up, that this is something that if we're really going to improve their health, their bones, really and enjoy their life. I teach happiness. So all of this is so, I just couldn't agree with you more in what you said. Is there anything else? We could go on and on, but is there anything else that you want to share with everybody before we end?
I know that all of this can sound a little bit overwhelming to some people. Particularly, I always think about people who already are dealing with chronic health issues, which we know in our online health community, that's a lot of people who are already not well. And so that can sound like, oh my God, I can't possibly like even think about this at the moment. Okay. So remember, overwhelm is stress. Okay. You don't want any overwhelm. If you've got like too many things coming at you and it's overwhelming you, you need to cut it off because you're just causing yourself more stress. But if you just pick that one thing that you're going to engage with, let's say it's deep breathing, or let's say it's gratitude, or something else that's really appealing to you at this time that can calm the system down. Just pick the one thing that is resonating with you right now, and just start doing a few minutes of that every day. Okay, and then you can build on it. Do not fall into this trap of I must be doing all of those million things, and you don't. I mean, if you're ready to take a deep dive into this, sure. I mean, come and find me and I will help you. But if you're not at a point where you want to do a deep dive into your trauma and your emotional layers, which is quite honestly is never as bad as people think it is. Never as bad as people think it is. But if they're not ready for it, then at least do something on a daily basis to make you a little bit more neurologically resilient and prevent yourself from accumulating more emotional trauma, more emotional layers. That's all I'm going to say because, that's important. Just pick that one thing, do it regularly, and that's going to help you already.
Oh, I love that. Well, I can't thank you enough, Dr. Eva, for being here and really sharing this such important messages with everybody. But where can people learn more about you?
So the best thing to do is to come to my website. So that's dr-eva.com. And like I said, I've got free guides. I've got different, very, very affordable resources that people can basically do what we were just describing today. They can achieve exactly that with those resources, because that's why I'm creating them. And I do want to make them affordable, and because I want as many people using it as possible. So all of that is, yeah, it's at my website, dreva.com.
I hope you enjoyed my interview with Dr. Eva and now have some action steps you can put into your life to start improving the function of your vagus nerve, which in turn will help your bones and overall health. And I have another resource to share with you, and it's happening this weekend. It's a free encore weekend for Dr. Peter Kahn's new masterclass, Harnessing the Power of Your Vagus Nerve. And you'll even get more techniques that you can put into your life. And having a healthy and functional vagus nerve has so many beneficial effects and really can help many of our common health hurdles, such as digestive problems, bloating, constipation, diarrhea, anxiety, and depression. It can help lower inflammation, increase your immune function, and even reverse the effects of toxic molds and more. So, all of this will be brought out in the masterclass. And it can even expand upon the knowledge that you learned today. So, I highly recommend it. And the link to that will be in the show notes. And I also recommend downloading my free Improve Your Bone Health Naturally mini course to help get you started on your path to optimal bone health. So thank you so much for tuning in, and I look forward to seeing you on the next episode.